Hey everybody, it's Will from the Back 40 and I hope you've had a great day today. I had a really long drive today. I went to St. Louis, Missouri, and for those of you that follow me, you know I live in the southwest part of the state. So round trip today, I spent 7 hours on the road on my way to an event in St. Louis where I was with like-minded people that were standing up against all of the crazy policies that are being put in place right now that are so harmful for rural America. And as is often the case, I'm sure many of you have done this. As I was driving home, had a 3.5-hour drive and hit some traffic outside of a little town called Lebanon, Missouri, so make that close to a 4-hour drive. I started really thinking about the challenges that we face as a country right now, how divided we are, how especially in rural America we're voting for personalities and not for the policies that we need to make rural America stronger. I'd argue to save it. And I don't know why it crossed my mind. I really don't. But for some reason I started thinking about 9/11. And I've told this story many times, but I was in Atlanta on 9/11. I was working for a large telecommunications company, and this was my first meeting with my new vice president and the rest of the team that I was working with. And I'm not a big fan of flying. Those of you that know me know that. So if I'm going on a shorter trip, say something within 4 or 5 hours, I'll typically drive. And I had driven into Atlanta. I was a single dad at the time, and I had 4 kids, and I had an Expedition because that held everybody. And drove the Expedition down to Atlanta for this meeting. And while we were in the meeting, my vice president's administrative assistant came in, and she basically said, hey, there's something going on in New York. They think that a Cessna may have flown into the World Trade Centers, and more to follow. Well, 20 minutes went by, however long it was, and she came in again, and this time when she came in, she was in tears. And she said, this is something a lot more serious than an accident. A passenger liner has flown into the World Trade Centers, now 2. And just like so many other people that day, immediately we ended our meeting, and the only television in the building, this would have been, obviously back in 2001, the only televisions in the building were down in a workout facility in the basement of the building. So like so many other people in this building, we went down to the fitness area, and we honestly walked into the fitness area to where the TVs were right as the first building was collapsing. And I remember all these feelings that came over me, but the first one was anger. Like many of you that were alive on that day that are old enough to remember, I just remember having an anger and feeling a visceral reaction to watching that building fall and feeling an anger well up inside of me. My heart rate increased. I felt my skin getting hot. I was really mad, like so many of you were. We made the decision, because of everything that was happening, to go ahead and call the meeting, not the least being that we weren't far from the CNN building, which the news media was announcing was a possible target. And it's the one time when my fear of flying actually benefited me. I jumped in my truck and started heading back to North Carolina from Georgia with all these emotions going through my head. And a lot of you will remember that we didn't have all of the news outlets that we have that live feed on our phones like we do today. So what all the local news stations did back when this happened is they put CNN on the radio station. Cut some backdoor deal. I don't know how it works, but anyway, all of the local news stations had CNN playing, covering these attacks on America. And I remember stopping at a gas station to fill up to get gas, and I don't think I've told a lot of you, but I used to be a volunteer driver for the Secret Service in Ohio back in the day. And I stopped to get gas, and there was another military guy there. His hair was cropped short, and I've had this happen a lot in my life because, people don't know about my farm injury, but they just assume that because of, how I hold myself and my haircut, etc., are you military, or maybe you're military. And he asked me if I was military, and I said, no, I'm not, but, I was a volunteer driver for the Secret Service when the president came into Ohio, and I said, I'm just angry right now. And he said, so am I. He goes, I may get called up. And anyway, there was just this feeling of anger and this feeling of not hopelessness, but what's going to happen next? Is everything going to be okay? And I got back on the road, and about 30 minutes down the road on my way to North Carolina, I came up on and passed a station wagon. And it was one of these old school panel wagon station wagons. And but it was in great shape. It was really well taken care of. And as I went around it, I noticed that there were two kids in the back seat. And as I went around it, I looked down at these kids in the back seat, and what I saw made me know that everything was going to be okay. And what I saw in the window was these little kids had taken, out of all the magazines they had in their car, construction paper, or anything they had peeled out like paper mache all the red, white, and blue. And they had made a little American flag. And they had taped it onto paper, and they had hung their little homemade American flag on the window of the car. And I mean, it was like somebody just poured a bucket of cold water over the top of my head. I knew in that moment that our country was going to come together. Don't ask me how I knew that. Don't ask me why. It was just two kids in the back of a station wagon. But somehow intuitively in my gut, I knew that we were going to be okay. And of course, by the time I got home the next morning when I got up, flags were flying. There were flag magnets on every car, truck, semi. And we came together as a country. And I was thinking about that, while at the same time I was thinking, what is going to be that thing that brings us together out of this abyss and anger that we feel right now? And my hope is that it's not going to be an event like that that forces us to once again recognize our American values and who we are as a single people and what we stand for, while all of that's being destroyed right now. Civil rights, the right to due process, being a leader of the free world. And in a more granular way, our schools and hospitals and farms and ranches in rural America. What is going to be the impetus that makes us realize once again that regardless of our political ideology, we are all Americans and we all want to save our rural way of life, and therefore we must come together to vote the right way to make that happen, even if we don't 100% agree with the party that best represents that effort, the party that is against tariffs, the party that is against defunding schools, the party that is against making it possible for Wall Street to buy up small family farms and ranches. What is going to be that motivator? I hope it's conversations like this one and not something worse. That's my hope. That's my prayer.